Hey guys, it's JJ Plagiarisms. The ripoff artist himself is here with his second response video. And today, we'll be looking at a video from Cosmonaut Variety Hour on his Force Awakens video that he published back in 2017. Personally, Cosmonaut is everything I hate about a Star Wars fan. He sucks off to the originals, hates the prequels, and sucks off to the sequels and the Disney movies. I absolutely hated this guy ever since his Force Awakens video. Even if you agree with his video, there is something very flawed about the video itself, which is something I'll get into after we're done dissecting it. So let's begin. Also, link to his video will be in the description if you want the full context. We're gonna skip over the first part of his video, because he just generalizes the sequel haters as saying that The Force Awakens is the worst movie ever made. He discusses that he likes The Force Awakens and goes on to defending it, but he puts some rules down first. Everything that he's going to address will fall under three categories: valid criticism, invalid criticism, and nitpicking. After that, he discusses the movie.
The Force Awakens is a ripoff of A New Hope. When I watched the movie, I thought that was kind of on purpose. Like, I don't think Disney thinks that people are dumb. Do you think they did it secretly and thought nobody would notice?
Yes, Disney does think people are dumb, but not for the reasons you just listed. They thought people were dumb and would just accept it, with only a minority of people complaining about it. And I'm ashamed to say that it worked somewhat. At least until The Last Jedi came out. Then people were more vocal against The Force Awakens.
You think that they were like, oh, we're gonna make The Force Awakens exactly the same. We're gonna make the same movie, and we're gonna be rich, and it's gonna be great. That's not how it works. Are you fucking dumb?
That's exactly what they thought. Especially the we're gonna be rich part. The movie would have sold, no matter what. So they went for the most insulting approach to the fans, instead of trying to create something. I wish we got Lucas's Episode 7 instead.
I'm gonna explain why it actually works pretty well. Star Wars is a simple fucking story. It's about good versus evil, and that is it.
What I hate the most about this defense video is that Marcus makes out the OG6 to be merely simplistic shit, so it can make The Force Awakens at the same level as the OG6, where it doesn't deserve to be. Star Wars was never as simple as being good versus evil. It was no Red Dead Redemption 2, but there was a lot of depth to them. A New Hope, the most simple of the OG6, implied a larger universe than what we saw. And the reason why A New Hope was the most simple is because it had to start somewhere. And each Star Wars movie in order of release expanded the universe. The film that broke the depth was The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens gave us little information on what happened after Return of the Jedi, and left us with more questions than answers. I guess Marcus would be right if he was talking about modern Star Wars being simplistic, but Lucas Star Wars? Hell no.
Not always. I mean, sometimes the more daring Star Wars stories can do pretty well. Star Wars is good at sticking to the concept of good guys versus bad guys, and what it means to be good or evil. The original trilogy conveyed this idea pretty well.
Marcus is acting like that's all the original trilogy did, and isn't good versus evil kind of broad? That's perfect material for a lot of depth. Revenge of the Sith does the morality thing perfectly. It's why it's my favorite Star Wars movie.
A lot of people say the prequels are better than The Force Awakens because at least they're original, and this is by far the dumbest shit you could ever say.
Well, for one, the prequels expanded on the universe instead of rebooting and plagiarizing what came before. And that isn't the only reason people prefer the prequels over The Force Awakens. Come on.
I'm gonna bring up an example from cooking shows, because that's what real internet critics do. I watch a lot of cooking competitions. That's why I'm such a good chef. You know when you're watching one of these shows and Alton Brown says,
I'm gonna give you half an hour to make jalapeno poppers.
And you think, yeah, okay, a jalapeno popper. I know what that is. I've been to fucking Chili's. But then one of the chefs goes into the kitchen and says,
I definitely want to reinterpret what a jalapeno popper is and give a Mediterranean twist on it.
Mediterranean? What the fuck? That is not a jalapeno popper. And then she makes this. This is what she makes.
It's wrapped in mozzarella cheese, and over here you have some hummus and popcorn with a little bit of lime on top.
I mean, yeah, it's original, but it's fucking nasty. That looks nasty. Why is there fucking popcorn on it?
This is a false equivalence. The chef, I presume, only had like a fucking hour to come up with a recipe. J.J. Abrams would have had months to come up with his draft for The Force Awakens. An original idea needs thought, which is something the chef didn't have because she had only an hour. J.J. Abrams didn't have it because he doesn't have a single creative bone in his body. This is a huge difference. The chef probably would have had a better recipe if she had a year to plan it out.
My point is that it doesn't matter if something's original, if it's still bad. Star Wars Episode 1 is the popcorn hummus jalapeno popper. It's original, yes, but it sucks.
Given the arguments you made in your prequel video, the films were fucking amazing and George Lucas should be commended, not condemned. I know this video isn't about the prequels, but considering what you had to say about that film, it doesn't suck.
The Force Awakens shares its plot structure with A New Hope. Yes, this is true. Nobody's saying that it isn't true. I just think it does it well. It diverges in enough areas to make it a unique experience. I didn't get the same feelings watching it as I do when I watch New Hope. When I watched The Force Awakens, I enjoyed the familiarity.
Even the most unoriginal plagiarized dumpster fires are gonna have their differences. In fact, they don't even have to be narratively similar. The Cars Life movies, rip-offs of Disney Pixar's Cars, have little similarities with the Cars movies. They're considered rip-offs because they have talking cars, and the whole concept is based on cars. I hate it when people say that it's not completely a rip-off. Of course it's not going to be a complete rip-off. No film is a complete rip-off. But it stole more than enough things to be considered a rip-off. It's also one of the worst types of rip-offs, since it directly stole the plot of an existing movie.
It's easy to drone on and say it's unoriginal, but if a movie is adapting similar circumstances but applying a different emotional context to it, it's considered an homage.
No, it's pretending to be a homage. What JJ did is he went and took A New Hope and changed some stuff around so people like you would point this out. As I said before, it's not completely a ripoff, no story is. Again, JJ took the plot of A New Hope and changed a few things around. Just like the copy homework, change a few words around maneuver, a plagiarist would do.
Let me explain, because apparently this is a foreign concept to some people. Luke is down on his luck and he wants to move out of his parents' house and have fun. He's also supposed to be the everyman. We're supposed to put ourselves in his shoes. Rey is basically stranded and we aren't shown how she got to the planet or why she's there. Part of her also wants to stay where she is. It's the same as A New Hope narratively, but it gives us a different emotional context.
Rey lives on a desert planet. She lives a shit life and she lives by luck chance. The fact that she lives on Jakku alone isn't enough to make her backstory original. You can very easily tell JJ stole George's idea for Luke and just changed a few things. And the changes that were made, like who her parents were, was a narrative decision intended for clickbait theory videos.
We may relate to Rey and her struggle, but we're more interested in the mystery behind why she's here.
Ah yes, JJ loves to drive us crazy with questions. It's bullshit.
An homage takes previously established elements and presents them in a new way.
It's not a homage, it's just pretending to be one.
Let's keep going. Let's look at more examples of this so you guys get the idea. Now, if this is a direct remake or a ripoff, then we should have characters that represent Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, Obi-Wan, R2, and 3PO. So Luke is Rey, right?
Yep, except more perfect, flat, and the only thing going for her is that she's too powerful.
Well, sort of, but not really. Her situation at the beginning of the movie is reminiscent of Luke's, but as far as personality goes, they're way different. Luke is a fucking brat in A New Hope. He's kinda rude.
Hello.
And impatient. Impatience is a trait that he keeps for most of the franchise. Everyone calls him impatient. I'd say that this is one of his strongest traits. Rey is the opposite. She's intent on waiting in one spot until her family comes back to get her. Rey is purposefully an inversion on Luke's personality.
That's only one example. I would like it if you went into more differences, because all you've told me is that Luke has a flaw but Rey doesn't in that regard. That just brings up another question. Why is Rey so good at everything?
So what about the other characters? Who is the Han Solo of this story? Who's the brash and cocky scoundrel? Poe?
Yes, he's the Han Solo of the story.
No, not really. He cracks jokes and he does some crazy shit, but I wouldn't say he's a stand-in for Han. He's not really around long enough to be that.
He's not in the movie as much as Han in A New Hope, so he's not a ripoff? What? Differing screen times is not a factor here.
So what about Finn? Well, no, Finn's the everyman, I guess. He's more of a vessel for the viewer to experience the story. He's not exactly the fish-out-of-water protagonist, though, because his knowledge of the universe makes him more important to the plot, but he's not as savvy as Han was in A New Hope.
Sounds like the C-3PO of the story. He's a vessel for the audience to experience the story. He's a coward, he knows shit, and he's the comic relief. Sounds exactly like C-3PO, except he's a black man who shoots a gun this time. And his backstory was stolen from the EU character Kyle Katarn, as in the fact that they were both top-tier stormtroopers before losing someone close to them, then going rogue and joining the good guys.
So, the character who's closest to being Han, I guess, is just Han? But he's way different than he used to be. He's not as cocky or stupid as he used to be in the original movie. He's wise in his own way.
Are you kidding me? Han was given the 180 reverse treatment. All the development he got in the original trilogy is gone. Now he's the brash, cocky smuggler he was in A New Hope. They hit the reset button on everything.
He also fits the role of mentor like Obi-Wan in the original movie, but he obviously isn't the same as Obi-Wan was. Ben was super disciplined and incredibly genre savvy. He knew what was going on before the audience did.
Han says that I have a bad feeling about this all the time. He very obviously knew something was wrong, just like Obi-Wan. The only difference was that Obi-Wan had the Force, but then again, the Force is with everyone. Always.
Han isn't like that. Han's just trying to hustle and make it work. So we don't have a Luke, we don't have a Han, and we don't have an Obi-Wan. I guess you're understanding what my point is.
We definitely have a Luke, a Han, and an Obi-Wan. And to add to it, we have an Emperor Palpatine, a Tarkin, and a Boba Fett.
These characters aren't rip-offs of pre-existing characters either. If you really want to say Chewie is a rip-off of Chewie, then, I don't know, go ahead. But that's stupid.
Who the hell said that Chewie was a rip-off of Chewie?
The only character that's a rip-off is BB-8, and I really actually don't like BB-8. I think he's the dumbest, most useless character in the Star Wars franchise.
Well, for once, it isn't Jar Jar Binks you have a gripe with the most. Bravo.
Don't get me wrong, I know Star Wars is all about selling toys. I'm not stupid, but I don't like it when it's so obvious. I'm looking at you dumbass fucking space penguin. Furby-looking ass. I think if R2-D2 took BB-8's place, the story would have been more interesting. Guess what, though? I should also mention that this criticism that I have, it falls under category 3. I hope you're seeing my point.
No, I'm not seeing your point.
So let's get back to the story. Like I said, the similar plot structure is effective because it presents events with different context and emotional significance.
No, JJ just took A New Hope and changed a few things around, just like any other plagiarized piece of work.
A dumb idiot person would look at this scene and say, hey, this is a ripoff of the Cantina scene. Well, let's look at the purpose of the Cantina scene from A New Hope. Our heroes need to leave the planet and rescue a princess. They group up with new characters, and in this scene we also manage to learn a lot about these new characters. We learn that Han is smart, but we also find out that he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, and that he might be more morally gray than the primarily good characters that we've met so far. We also learn that the wise old sage that we've gotten to know is a fucking badass. Lastly, this scene is good for world building, but its primary goal is to get the characters together and start them on their journey. It ends on a relatively high note. Let's take a look at the purpose of the castle scene in The Force Awakens and how its context makes it different. Our heroes have already met each other, but they need to meet with a third party to help them settle on their next course of action. This is not the primary goal of the scene, however, because whatever reason they have to go to the castle and meet with Maz Kanata is not what the scene is intended to focus on. Instead, this scene brings our heroes to their low point in the story. In traditional story structure, this is where our heroes are tested. This is the middle of the movie, so we see our heroes disagree with each other, split up, and even get defeated. Rey decides to ignore her destiny because she wants to go back to where she was. Finn ignores his destiny because he doesn't want to go back to where he was. The goal of this scene is to split our heroes up, and it ends on a low note. This scene in A New Hope ends on a high note because it happens at the beginning of the movie when things are building up. This scene in The Force Awakens ends on a low note because it happens in the middle of the movie after our heroes have triumphed more than once.
It sounds to me like they just swapped the scenes around and repurposed them for different plot points. That doesn't make a story original, that just means you just swap scenes around.
The purpose of the scene is completely different. What's happening here is completely different. I could go through every scene in this movie and explain why they're different, but I think I've made my point.
No, it doesn't. You're making the same arguments that people who defend plagiarists make. Stop defending plagiarism. It's illegal and it's immoral. If you were George Lucas, you would have been pissed that Disney stole your movie within the same franchise.
There are similar elements between these movies, yes, but they are presented with a different tone and significance, so I think it works. But I'd also like to address another idea, because I think it's only fair to try and see both sides of this argument. Some people out there might be saying, okay, yeah, The Force Awakens succeeds at being an homage, whatever, but I really would have preferred a new Star Wars story. What's wrong with making a new story? And yes, I fully agree with this. In a perfect world, this movie would have been a completely new movie. However, I would like to posit the theory that that is not possible.
What?
I mean it. This idea was not possible in this scenario. Just because of the fact that Disney doesn't really work that way, guys.
It's not possible because of Disney and how they work. What kind of argument is that? What the fuck are you talking about?
Disney was obviously not going to produce a wild and crazy new Star Wars story right off the bat. The last Star Wars movies didn't really leave a good taste in society's mouth.
You mean the loud and proud minority that started a crusade against George Lucas in the prequels, who caused the signing over to Disney, and now we're stuck with these jackasses?
Good job.
Say what you want about Disney, but they're good at getting people in the theater. They usually play it safe first. They'll experiment a little bit, but not a lot. Disney likes to test the waters before they dive in and make something crazy and bold. I also would have loved a completely original movie, but I knew what I was getting into.
The point about Disney playing it safe first makes no sense. Star Wars is an already established universe with 6 films already. There was no reason for them to play it safe first. They were just lazy.
If you look at the original concepts for this movie, how the original script was based around Luke's severed hand, and how Kylo Ren was basically this weird cyborg that hunted Force artifacts, yeah, that shit would have been wild. I probably would have liked that a lot, but they rewrote the script because it might have been a little too weird for regular people.
From what I understand, Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney at the time, wanted the film to feel as quintessentially like Star Wars as possible, but completely disregarded George's story outlines for the trilogy. They rewrote the script because they wanted to appeal to the OT fanatics, not because the script was too weird, and you ate that shit right up.
That's okay. This movie doesn't need to be revolutionary. You can't plan that sort of thing.
It would have been hard for the sequels to be on the same level as the beloved OG6. Copying A New Hope didn't help, and as said before, they should have used George's outlines.
So I would say overall, this whole complaint about The Force Awakens being a carbon copy of A New Hope falls under Category 3. Yeah, you're right, but it works, so get over it.
Paying to see A New Hope 2.0 isn't a nitpick, it's a glaring problem with the movie. Why the lack of originality matters is because I've already experienced this story, and if I wanted to experience it again, I just watched the original movie. And plus, rebooting everything makes the OT pointless because history just repeated itself. What a waste.
Part 2. Bad movies. What really grinds my gears is when people say The Force Awakens is a bad movie. People really need to reevaluate what a bad movie is.
I don't like where he's going with this.
This movie was absolute garbage. The acting. This is the worst acting I have seen in my life.
Really? You should probably watch more movies.
I want him dead. I want his head cut off and brought here. I want his head on this piano!
So saying that this movie had worse acting makes The Force Awakens performances good? I don't know what Marcus is saying here.
The people who unironically say The Force Awakens is the worst movie ever made are the kind of people that I don't take very seriously when it comes to movie discussion.
It's this thing called hyperbole. It's very popular with the kids these days.
Yes. The fact that you showed the jackasses at Red Letter Media who said, Star Wars The Phantom Menace was the most disappointing thing since my son, makes you a hypocrite for when hardcore sequel haters shit on The Force Awakens.
I don't see a bad movie as something like The Room or Troll 2. These movies have redeemable qualities. They're actually fun to watch. They're hilarious. If your movie's well known enough to get a big Hollywood mockumentary starring James Franco and Seth Rogen, then maybe you're doing something right. What I'm saying is that even if these movies only succeed at making you laugh at them because they're so incompetent, then they succeeded at something, even if it wasn't intentional. These are all what most people would call bad movies, right? Well, I would like to propose the idea that these should not be considered bad movies. Bad movies are movies that leave you empty.
Have you considered that we genuinely hate The Force Awakens? I don't think The Force Awakens is funny. The jokes fall flat. And the problems I have with it don't make me chuckle. They make me frustrated. Saying that everyone definitely enjoyed The Force Awakens is a lie.
Lots of edgy people like to say The Force Awakens is a bad movie, or even better, the worst movie ever made. A big Hollywood movie that made $1 quadrillion worldwide and was initially loved by everybody?
If we're judging the movie based on how much money it made, then this film is a fucking masterpiece, while this film is a cinematic disaster. And on the topic of The Thing, if we're judging it based on the initial audience reception, then The Thing is one of the worst movies ever made. because it was panned across the board by critics back in the day. It wasn't until DVD releases that people actually appreciated the movie. Perspectives change. Hell, even you wanted us to give The Last Jedi more time in a different video.
No, that movie sucks, right? Did I say loved by everybody? Yeah, I did, because I'm not fucking brain dead. I remember when the movie came out. Everybody liked it. I can't even count how many people liked the movie at first and then realized everybody else liked it and then decided that they hate it.
You make it sound like it's wrong to change your mind.
But here's another thing. I'm gonna give everybody the benefit of the doubt, or at least attempt to. I noticed that this movie is not good on multiple rewatches. This is something that I found that most big Hollywood blockbusters are suffering from. The Marvel movies are also like this. Watching them over and over again reveals the cracks. I still don't think it sucks, I don't think it's awful, but I would categorize The Force Awakens as a decent action-adventure movie, and that's just about it.
Yeah, it's inoffensive and bland. It's just decent. We should expect way more from a Star Wars movie. If this was the first film in the franchise, it would get away with it. But this is a film that came after 6 other films.
It's not the worst movie ever made, and it's not the best movie ever made. It's competent, it's decent, it's fun to watch.
Competent? No. It ruins everything by hitting the reset button. Decent? No. It's terrible and only appeals to the OT fanatics instead of everyone. Fun to watch? Maybe the first time, but just like fast food, you get sick of it.
Even if you personally don't like it, which is perfectly fine, it's kind of an exaggeration to say that this movie is garbage.
A film that stole its plot from another movie within the same franchise and made us go crazy with questions by goading us to see the sequels for answers absolutely counts as garbage.
Part 3. Mary Sue. Rey's a Mary Sue and she has no right being so good at everything. I know. But let's look at the heroes that we have been previously shown in Star Wars. Anakin Skywalker is literally born without a father, just like Jesus was. He's naturally the best pilot in the galaxy, the best swordsman, the most powerful Force user. He single-handedly destroys the entire Trade Federation army on his own when he was 9 years old. He's the chosen one, and everyone knows he's very important.
The only valid point you put out is that Anakin destroyed the Trade Federation army when he was 9. With the other points, he was taught piloting, he was taught sword fighting, and he's the most powerful Force user because he has the highest midichlorian count, which the Phantom Menace actually explained, unlike the origin of Rey's power in The Force Awakens. As for being the chosen one and everyone acknowledging him as important, that doesn't mean they treated him as such. Anakin was actually treated like shit by the Jedi. A key trait of a Mary Sue is that everyone immediately flocks to them, being ally or enemy, which was not the case with Anakin. Also, Marcus forgot the fact that Anakin was conflicted throughout the entire trilogy, and ultimately failed in the end, as he fell to the dark side and lost his wife and children, became deformed, and became a slave to Palpatine, so he is most definitely not a Larry Stu. I think you've been watching too much of the Clone Wars animated show. The two Anakins are very different. One is a realistic representation of a conflicted young man, and the other is a Larry Stu that appeals to the OT fanatics who expected Anakin to be a complete badass while religiously watching the original trilogy on repeat.
This is like a bad D&D character. The prequels are easy to pick on, right? So let's look at something else. Luke Skywalker lived in the fucking desert and did nothing but shoot rats. But he's also the only pilot other than Wedge Antilles who survives the trench run.
Who the hell is this then?
And he lands a shot that is impossibly hard to land. They mention multiple times that it's hard to land this shot.
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
Good thing that practice on Tatooine paid off. Practice you will never mention he had.
Oh, he's also really good at shooting a laser gun, and he's capable of using the Force with no training whatsoever.
It's heavily implied that Luke would have been trained by his uncles with a blaster to fight off Tusken Raiders. As for him using the Force with no training, the thing is, he did have training, albeit very brief, and it actually took him some time to Force pull the fucking lightsaber. He's flawed.
Also, without ever having used the turret on the Millennium Falcon, he's able to defeat a squadron of trained TIE fighter pilots. He's never even been in a space battle before.
Again, good thing that training and practice on Tatooine paid off. Luke was actually established to know this shit.
In the third movie, he goes on to defeat Darth Vader without any formal lightsaber training whatsoever.
Again, he did have training, and it's heavily implied that Vader let him win. There's no way Luke could have beat Vader without him holding back. and there was setup for why Vader did this.
It doesn't really sound right when you say that stuff about Luke, right? Those are kind of nitpicky things, right? Well, these are all the same criticisms that are leveled against Rey. They're almost exactly the same.
What the hell happened to the claim that Rey and Luke weren't the same earlier in this video?
Everybody in Star Wars is a Mary Sue. I'm just saying that we should hold all these movies to the same standard.
No, we will not put The Force Awakens to the same standard as the OG6. It doesn't deserve it. The Force Awakens is a fan fiction that is an insult to fan fiction writers, as that community has probably never seen such a lazy, coincidence-filled rewrite of the old trilogy.
So let's go ahead and analyze these a bit further. Rey knows how to fix ships and fly in ships so well, but she's not a pilot. Okay, but she obviously knows how ships work. The first time we see her, she's exploring and salvaging parts from a ship, an old ship. A ship from the same era as the Millennium Falcon.
Just because you scrap parts from a ship does not make you an expert on ships in any capacity. The most Rey would know is what to scavenge and what's valuable and what isn't.
Now, while a Star Destroyer and a smuggling freighter are obviously way different, it can be implied that since she works on a spaceship junkyard, she may know how things work a little bit, right?
No, because she works on a spaceship junkyard. She doesn't fix ships, she scraps them.
She seems to convey some sort of casual familiarity with the Millennium Falcon.
Some moof milker put a compressor on the ignition line.
Uncle Pluck did. I thought it was a mistake too. Puts too much stress on the hyperdrive.
She obviously knows a little bit about the ship.
Yeah, for no reason, and there's no reason she would know anything about it.
She, at the very least, seems confident in flying the quad jumper.
Hey! We need a pilot!
We've got one!
I'm pretty sure the quad jumper is a land vehicle and doesn't fly.
She knows ships. It's shown to us from the very beginning. This is more than Luke Skywalker gets.
You bet I could. I'm not such a bad pilot myself.
Oh, good for you!
There was actually a lot more in the film. Biggs says that Luke is such a good pilot, and you can actually see a ship in this shot. He's not a Larry Stu.
This doesn't make me mad, so why does this make everybody mad? This criticism falls under category 2, invalid.
It's not invalid criticism.
Oh, well, Rey knows how to use the Force without any training. Explain that. I should first mention that it is commonly shown in the Star Wars series that people can use the Force without training.
Use the Force, Luke. Let go, Luke.
That's a bad example. Luke wasn't directly using the Force, he was using his instincts, which is something any untrained Force-sensitive could do.
I will refer back to this point. How did Luke know that this was gonna fucking work? We have not seen any characters use the Force to move things with their mind until this point.
What the hell was he supposed to do? That was his only option, unless you think getting eaten is a better idea.
While characters aren't entirely familiar with the extent of the power of the Force, some people have a decent idea of how it can be used.
That's wrong. Until The Force Awakens came out, it was clearly established that you needed training, something Rey never got.
Rey seems to know the stories about the Rebellion and the Jedi. When Han says the Force and the Jedi are real, Rey doesn't say, "What's the Force? What's a Jedi?"
What does prior knowledge of the Force have to do with experience using it?
The main character has a strong affinity for the Force. Oh, this is the worst writing I've ever seen!
The problem isn't that she's strong with the Force. The problem is that her character breaks all the pre-established rules of Star Wars.
But let's talk about the scene where she uses the Jedi mind trick. You might think, okay, so she has an idea of how the Force works. That's fine. But how does that explain how she knows what a Jedi mind trick is? Guys, people in Star Wars know what a fucking Jedi mind trick is. Jabba knows what it is. Even fucking Watto knows what it is, and he lives on an outer rim planet that doesn't even use government-issued currency.
I never used that as an argument myself, but to address that, Jabba's around 600 years old. He's gonna know what a Jedi mind trick is by then. Watto probably knows about it because his species are immune to the Jedi mind trick. It's probably something he'd be taught. It isn't clear how Rey knows what a Jedi mind trick is, and even if it was, there's no reason how she would know how to pull it off, especially since the way she did it was way different to how Jedi in previous movies did it. by waving their hands, which Rey didn't do, which implies that she didn't need to do it the traditional way, which makes her even more of a Mary Sue. And what the hell does using a different currency have to do with anything?
Republic credits are no good out here. I need something more real.
What I'm trying to say is, this dude can't even accept your American Express card, but he knows what a Jedi mind trick is.
Mind tricks gonna work on me. Only money.
Again, using a different currency has nothing to do with knowing anything. I'm Australian, but I know everything that goes on in the US.
Yeah. I'm mad. I didn't watch this movie and think, wow, it's really convenient that she knows that move, because people know it's a thing that exists. Category 2, this is invalid.
Invalid? More like completely valid.
Alright, we got one more. Here we go. Rey beats Kylo Ren even though he knows how to use a lightsaber, and she doesn't. Rey is shown to be capable of fighting with a melee weapon. This is actually shown to us, so again, it's not unreasonable for her to know how to use a lightsaber.
Wrong again. All that Rey was established to do was swing a stick around, and that was against unarmed opponents. And a staff is very different from a single-hilt lightsaber. Ask a melee weapons expert. The explanation you put out doesn't work. Kylo Ren should have won.
It's not like this shit comes out of nowhere. If she never fought anybody with a melee weapon, and then she kicked his ass no problem, then yeah, I would agree that it doesn't make any sense.
At best, the film tried to explain her ability to use a single-hilt lightsaber, but failed. Again, just because Rey swung a stick around doesn't mean she can beat the apprentice of Luke Skywalker.
But hey, I'll indulge your idea anyway, sure. She knows how to swing a stick around, but Kylo Ren was literally trained by Luke Skywalker, right? He should have an advantage. I would totally agree that in a fair fight, Kylo Ren should be able to beat Rey and Finn at the same time. But this fight isn't fair. Kylo Ren is clearly visibly wounded. He's fucking limping through the fight. The movie shows us multiple times that this motherfucker has a gunshot wound that obviously hurts pretty bad. The reason for making him wounded in the fight is so our heroes have a chance in beating him.
I've heard this argument before. Yes, Kylo Ren is wounded, but if he really thought he would lose, he could have used Force Stasis to freeze both and kill both. Or maybe just Finn because he took an interest in using Rey as an asset.
He was shot with a motherfucking Wookiee bowcaster. Even if you don't know how strong they are from a fucking book or video game like I am, the movie shows you 3 times how strong it is. I'm honestly more upset that Kylo Ren didn't just die right away from getting shot. But nevertheless, he is very, 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 very wounded. He has a big boo-boo.
If it hurt that bad, he could have used Force Stasis.
Let's go ahead and just throw in another boo-boo for good measure. Guys, it's not unreasonable that he loses.
You know, this doesn't even make sense for the first entry of a trilogy to have the bad guy lose in a fight. And the fact that Kylo Ren is incompetent, that means one of our main villain is a joke.
I save this shit for the end because it pisses me off when I see elements that are shown to the audience in order to cover certain bases, but everybody ignores them.
We ignored them because those explanations don't work.
Other than having a high aptitude for the Force, everything she does is completely reasonable for the hero of a sci-fi adventure movie. Category 2.
Okay, so that's the end of Cosmonaut defending The Force Awakens. Now here's how I saw it. It was dreadful. He kept on trying to downplay the OG6 so he could give some room for The Force Awakens to be in the same category. And he only addressed like 2 criticisms. Let's count it. He starts by defending plagiarism and passes off the criticism as nitpicking. He then talks about people who call The Force Awakens a bad movie, which doesn't have to do anything with criticism. It's just people stating what they think the quality of the film is. Then he talks about the Mary Sue criticism, yet he pulls the category 2 card 3 times to give the illusion that he's debunking different criticisms, when in fact he's talking about different aspects of the same criticism. So really, he only talked about 2 criticisms. He didn't really explain any other big criticisms, like how the stories are driven by coincidence and contrivance, or how there's mountains of plot holes that the film never answers. He only addressed the top 2 criticisms, that being the ripoff complaint and the Mary Sue complaint, and acting like he debunked most things. He doesn't mention either of these criticisms I mentioned, and the logic he uses for the stuff he does address is flawed. And the fact that he dared to defend plagiarism, the act of stealing and taking someone else's ideas and passing it off as your own, just goes to show how much he's a Disney shill. The Force Awakens was indeed the worst Star Wars movie, right until this abortion came out.